Hey everyone, today I'm excited to share with you the go-to solution for protecting landowners during wildfire season, our startup, InfernoGuard. I want to first start by introducing you to Corey Bingaman, longtime forester at Collins Co. Lumber, who woke up last August to thick, harmful smoke and a frantic midnight phone call from his coworker. Collins Co. Lumber was in flames. And in a matter of hours, Corey watched his livelihood burn to the ground because of one uncontained fire. In fact, the biggest problem with wildfires today is that massive fires can burn undetected for hours or even days. This past summer's Dixie Fire burned for 12 hours before an employee investigating power outages noticed sparking cables and flames radiating throughout the forest floor. But if you think 12 hours is long, just look at the Bootleg Fire, which started in a remote Oregon forest and smoldered for over 7 days before being detected. And because of this gap in detection, landowners like Corey are left defenseless against these uncontrollable wildfire threats. Our solution can detect these fires immediately. My name's Kevin, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of InfernoGuard, an end-to-end wildfire monitoring solution for large-scale landowners. As you can see, our network of devices are placed directly on trees and continuously report environmental data back to our users. And with over 400 million acres of land at risk of wildfires each year, both public and private landowners are hungry for our solution, leaving a $51.2 billion opportunity for InfernoGuard in the United States alone. But within this, we're most excited about the private revenue-generating landscape, because these landowners rely on their property for business. Now, globally, this total market surpasses $771 billion and is only growing as the climate crisis evolves, with wildfire risk expected to increase 30% by 2050. And because of this ominous trend, there's no solution more timely than InfernoGuard's.
After conversations with over 75 vendors from across the United States, we found that 100% of interviewees rely almost solely on word of mouth or direct sight to indicate fires on their properties. Now, landowners rely on these aforementioned options because, quite frankly, other wildfire detection methods that currently exist today just don't cut it. Specifically, satellite imagery, wildfire cameras, and sensor networks have major flaws that are detrimental to wildfire detection. Some of the most prominent flaws are the inability to detect small fires, poor detection times, and incorrect sensor analysis that can lead to huge delays and also false positives. Now, this leaves word of mouth as the only viable option, the only competitor, and the current industry standard. But don't just take our word for it. One of our biggest partners at Yosemite National Parks said, quote, "We're pretty old school. Visitors mostly report fires or even commercial planes flying overhead."
Our team has support from numerous colleges and years of teamwork under our belt to tackle this problem head on. We've even welcomed an experienced board of advisors from highly regarded industries, including the chief of fire at Yosemite, to provide key guidance in the coming years. Our work began as 4 eager high school freshmen with a massive stainless steel box and sprayable foam insulation. But over the course of 5 years, we've come to realize the solution requires a unique combination of modeling, hardware, and software to provide maximum property coverage. Hundreds of conversations with landowners, industry experts, and mentors has shaped our unique 3-step solution for early wildfire detection. 1, assess risk on a landowner's property. 2, deploy our utility patented hardware devices. And 3, stay informed through continued data access. The solution begins with our wildfire risk model, which evaluates 11 different environmental factors down to the 10th of an acre to identify high-risk areas on a landowner's property. This fully automated software can remotely analyze any property across the entire United States in a matter of seconds, creating an intuitive and color-coded map for the landowner. And we've validated this assessment with over 90% of the wildfires that we've analyzed starting in high-risk areas. This forms the basis for InfernoGuard's customized deployment strategy, where we place hardware devices at a density of 1 device per acre in high-risk areas and along the landowner's perimeter, as shown in red, to ensure protection from all wildfire threats. Additionally, we've recently monetized this assessment to our first paying customer, O'Neill Pine Co., and this serves as great lead gen for product deployments. Our flagship hardware product has been tested and deployed in remote environments and accomplishes 3 main goals: collect environmental data, analyze the data collected, and directly notify both landowners and first responders. Our device analyzes 6 different environmental factors to determine wildfire presence, including temperature, humidity, particulate matter, CO2, CO, and NO2, and utilizes emission ratios to filter out false positives. Lastly, our team is excited to launch both web and mobile platforms this summer, completing our holistic solution for landowners and bringing our product to market.
Next, I'd love to walk you through our business model by referencing our good friend Corey at Collins Co-Lumber. Collins Co-Lumber owns over 100,000 acres of ponderosa pine in Chester, California. Tragically, last August, $150 million in revenue was wiped off of Collins Co-Lumber due to the fires that scorched through the state. In conversations Kevin and I have had with Corey, he's communicated to us that he wished InfernoGuard's solution was available at the time for implementation on their properties. Now, this 3-pronged business model that we would have used looks like this. First, we would have run a risk assessment. This risk assessment, like Kevin said, would take into account the high-risk areas on the Collins Co-Lumber property. We did actually end up running a mock risk assessment for their properties and found that they would need about 4,000 devices deployed across the high-risk areas. Finally, we would have a monthly subscription fee to provide data analysis as well as routine maintenance. Now, the cost of this entire business strategy is less than 1% of Collins Co-Lumber's annual revenue. A small price to pay for ensuring that hundreds of millions of dollars are saved and thousands of acres are protected for years to come. Now, because of this immense growth and immense value for landowners, InfernoGuard has seen new partnerships and sponsorships with many companies across the United States. We're excited to announce that we have many interested beta customers for this summer, shown here, and we're also looking into new ventures with insurance companies, wildlands management firms, to provide new distribution channels to illuminate our product as we bring it to market.
An energy executive even mentioned that InfernoGuard's product was one of the most compelling he's seen because it can quickly identify sparks from broken power lines and help keep the lights on for millions. But above all, timber companies expressed the greatest interest due to the natural harvesting cycle of timber, where one single uncontained fire can leave over 40 years of anticipated revenue scorched and useless. In order to serve this market, InfernoGuard has a robust and ambitious 6-month roadmap ahead of us. Key relationships with product developers at Inventus Partners and test sites at the USDA allows InfernoGuard to further validate our technology in prescribed burn environments before bringing our product and SaaS services to market this summer. With 3 to 5 paid pilot deployments under our belt, InfernoGuard anticipates $75,000 in sales this year. And after large-scale manufacturing, InfernoGuard's revenue skyrockets by 2026, deploying to about 25 mid-sized timber organizations. But our work at InfernoGuard has always been about supporting the landowners who need our solution the most. Because of this, revenue acquired from summer deployments will go directly towards providing monitoring services for our partners at the Wildlands Nature Conservancy, a non-for-profit nature preserve at high wildfire risk. And in the long term, InfernoGuard's product has the potential to save 143 billion timber trees at risk of wildfires each year and preserve over 90 million metric tons of CO2 from the atmosphere annually. A small goal in reversing climate change for good. In order to achieve this type of financial impact, environmental sustainability, and giving back, InfernoGuard needs a successful product launch this summer. In order to do so, we've already received over $150,000 in non-dilutive funding. And the $40,000 TCU Values and Ventures Grand Prize would close InfernoGuard's funding needs in order to launch, allowing our team to finalize our mobile platform, build product inventory, and hire a deployment team. This now gives landowners the tools they need for the quickly approaching 2022 wildfire season. Your investment will aid in our mission to mitigate wildfire threats across the globe. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, InfernoGuard from Northwestern University. Any judges?
Thank you. That's a really good presentation. I think really my biggest question is how much staff are you going to need to actually deploy this over large tracts of land? I saw in your business plan that you were estimating that you would need 5 staff to cover 100,000 acres in 36 hours. How did you come up with that number?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of it is based off of the deployment strategy and the markets that we're working with. So timber organizations actually have really well built out road systems across their entire property, mainly for harvesting reasons. And because of that, we estimated a time for per acre deployments, as well as in the high risk areas traveling to and from those different areas for the physical deployment itself. And then also the mounting times. That's something that we've tested a lot with different landowners and understanding how to maximize that time and make sure that it's super efficient for the landowner itself. But that 24 to 36 hours was basically just five teammates going in and doing that physical deployment, but it is a full-scale deployment.
Okay, that was kind of based on a defined roadway system through a lumber company, not necessarily wildlife park where you've got to actually navigate terrain and all that.
Correct, and I mean, these are the primary markets that we're trying to serve, which is kind of partially in the reason why we chose them, because they do have an easy deployment strategy.
Okay.
So I don't know the space really well, but
Sure.
how come none of the other companies with sensors, because it's really all these sensors are already out there on the market, have kind of approached and targeted this space? Why do you think you guys are going to be the first ones?
Yeah, so one of the biggest problems is actually minimizing false positives. It's a huge problem for landowners and something that a lot of industry members have a hard time tackling. We've actually worked with members, smoke emission experts from the USDA, to help us calculate these emission ratios, and I think that's honestly the most challenging part. In terms of the way in which we do that, there are certain ratios of gases that have to be present in order to determine that wildfire presence. And just 48 hours ago, there was actually a wildfire in Boulder, Colorado. Crazy to think that there are wildfires in early April, but our device was actually out there for testing and picked up on that live wildfire using those emission ratios. So we feel really confident in actually tackling that problem itself, and we believe that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, and additionally, being from rural Washington and kind of experiencing wildfires over the past 5 years of my life, I've seen a lot of mitigation efforts and a lot of companies trying to kind of solve wildfires while they're happening, but the prevention efforts just really don't take into account the environmental factors and the advanced systems necessary to really prevent these fires from happening.
What's the liability in your business model? So let's say you have a lot of sensors and your sensors malfunction and there ends up being a huge fire. How do you protect yourselves as a business?
Yeah, really good question. So first thing that I'll say is I've been working on this venture for over 5 years, and I'm very cautious about making sure that the emission ratios are 100% accurate before going to market. The other thing that I'll say is I have a really specialized sponsor and board of advisor member who works specifically with liability itself. But one thing that I do want to note that I think kind of helps answer this question is kind of goes back to the way that our app is structured, because we're actually able to identify for any reason, if a device were to go down for any reason, it would actually be on the app and we would receive instant notification. And that's really the biggest problem with causing a liability like that. What we'll do in that situation is send them a device that needs to be replaced, and they'll go out and be able to make that change themselves. But not shown on the picture here, we actually have the battery percentage of the device, if the device is sending cell signal, and if so, how strong, things like that. And we're actually able to kind of identify those threats on the app before we create a problem that would allow for something like that.
Got it.
Good question.
Can you address kind of the technology and the network required? And so a lot of these aren't in places that have like great 5G, wireless and all that.
Yeah, great question.
What is the technology you're using in order to make sure these units continually fire and can report back?
Yeah, so we're using something called LoRa, which is a low-frequency mesh network. The way that we like to explain it is that about 2 to 3 devices across Collins Co. property would need to have cell or Wi-Fi connectivity. That could be an office space as simple as where they work out of, or one location that has strong cell signal. Every landowner we've ever spoken to says that they can deploy 2 to 3 devices across 100,000 acres. And then the rest of the devices are actually able to streamline directly to those gateways, is what we like to call them. So we'll be able to actually hop between node to node and node to gateway as well, something that we're actually implementing right now with our product developers before we bring the product to market.
Can you talk a little bit about, if you go back to your product plan from the beginning till now, a little bit how you got into this and what generated the interest and that kind of little bit more background for us there?
Yeah, totally. So I'm originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, about 150 miles away from the Appalachian Mountains. And when I was a freshman in high school, there were some really bad wildfires in the Appalachian Mountains that I had never experienced before as someone from, the Southeast or the East Coast. And that prompted my teammates and I to actually get started on working on the project because we noticed the secondary effects of wildfires, like smoke and things like that. But the effects on Appalachian communities were absolutely devastating. We actually entered STEM competitions throughout high school and things like that to get it started. But when I came to Northwestern and noticed the resources that they have for entrepreneurial endeavors, that's really when we started picking up on this. And in the last 9 months, we went from the scrappy product that you've seen to, $150,000 in non-dilutive funding and a product that's going to go to market this summer.
Yeah, and again, so I grew up in rural Washington in Chelan County, and we've been dealing with wildfires for pretty much all my life and the smoke and what that brings to our communities, but it hadn't really been getting advertised in the media and since it started hitting Seattle and the bigger cities in the West with the influence of that smoke from those wildfires. And kind of what I've always thought to myself is, yes, wildfires cause a lot of damage to land, but they do cause a lot of damage to lives and communities as well. And now in that July through August period, we have to make sure we have all our inhalers, all of our asthma medication ready, and then also all those air filters and fans ready for the ash to come in from those wildfires. So at this point, it almost is expected that we're going to have severe wildfires. And when I came to Northwestern and heard about InfernoGuard, I just had to join because I hadn't heard of any other business really out there doing what we're doing here.
Great presentation. I live in California and Idaho, so the problem you guys are solving resonates extremely well, so thank you. My question is a little bit about the underlying IP, and you talked about this a little bit, but the magnitude of the problem is huge. The cost for the landowner is relatively high, as a percentage of revenue, relatively low, but the cost itself relatively high. Is there a role that the insurance companies can play in driving adoption for what it is you're trying to do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we've actually just begun customer discovery conversations with those insurance industries. We view that as a huge market beyond our initial target audience because it's a win-win for both the landowner and the insurance company. 78% of privately owned timber organizations don't have insurance because of the threatening challenges of actually getting wildfire insurance. You can't really blame the insurance companies, right? It's a huge problem that they're facing. So we think that we would be able to actually license our technology to those insurance companies, and not only would it provide further information for them, but it would also de-risk the chances of them having wildfire threats on their property, and something that we're definitely hoping to expand to, but kind of like we said, the most immediate traction and willingness to pay that we've at least identified so far has been timber.
And to add on to that, on the sales side, we do have a advanced CRM kind of analysis through Salesforce and really have been making cold calls over the past 6-7 months, really trying to connect with timber organizations as well as vineyards and understand what they're looking for and what they're willing to pay. And initially we started off on the sales side really just trying to sell the risk assessment. And when we did make a few sales, the sales team and I kind of took a step back. We worked with Northwestern's Integrated Marketing Communications Office and developed a strategy to really find how we're going to make these sales and what tones to use, as timber organizations are generally more independent and harder to find online, as we've seen in our selling process. We kind of had to double back and really understand our customer, which is what we're really proud of, is putting our customer first, understanding what they want out of our product. And I think that doubles back to the fact that will these landowners be willing to pay? And in the conversations we've had with them, they definitely have expressed their interest. And like we said, we have beta customers for the summer, so we're definitely looking forward to it.
Thanks. Thank you.
So I actually happened to be in Boulder last weekend when the fire came up in El Dorado and was in the evacuation zone. Question, does one of the sensors in your device include wind speed and/or direction?
Yeah, so wind speed and direction is not something that we evaluate in our physical device itself, but it's actually something that we're hoping to overlay with the app coming in this spring, because that completely controls where the wildfire is moving, how fast it's going to pick up, and homeowners are really, really worried about wind speed. That's what they care about the most. So having that integration into the app is where we're most focusing our time and energy, because we can actually be able to have control over where the wildfire is moving when we identify which devices are pinging of that wildfire threat. But great question.
Thank you, InfernoGuard from Northwestern University.